Thank you, Deputy Jones. In the case of People versus Conrad Robert Murray, Dr. Murray is present with his counsel, Mr. Chernoff, Mr. Flanagan, Mr. Gorgian, Mr. Pena. The people are represented by their counsel, Mr. Waldron, Ms. Brazil. Dr. Kamangar is once again on the witness stand. All jurors and the alternates are present. To everybody, good morning. To jurors, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And Doctor, good morning, sir. You acknowledge you are still under oath and still sworn to tell the truth. Thank you. This will be cross-examination by the defense. Mr. Flanagan. Good morning.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Dr. Kamangar.
Yes, sir.
Am I pronouncing it right?
That was perfect.
Kamangar.
That's right.
You've reviewed the transcript of Dr. Murray and his statement to the police in this case?
I have.
And you've reviewed the paramedic reports?
That's correct.
Have you also reviewed the medical records of Dr. Klein?
I have.
Okay. In your review of documents, you've become aware of the fact that Dr. Murray did treat Michael Jackson for approximately 2 months for his sleep problems with propofol, correct?
What I was aware from the records provided for me by Mr. Wallgren from Dr. Klein's treatment of Mr. Jackson was...
No, I was talking about Dr. Murray. Did I say Jackson or did I say Klein?
Klein.
Excuse me. Dr. Murray, Dr. Murray treated Mr. Jackson for approximately 2 months with propofol without problem. Are you aware of that?
I was aware of that, yes.
And you're further aware of the fact that about 3 days before Michael Jackson's death, that Dr. Murray decided to change Michael Jackson's treatment to try and get him less dependent upon propofol for sleep?
I was definitely one of the question. I think the question should be that's what Dr. Murray said.
Sustained. We ask.
You are aware of the fact that Dr. Murray stated to the police that he had attempted to change the treatment 3 days before his death to try and get him less dependent upon propofol.
That's what I read in his interview with Detective Martinez. That's
Okay.
correct.
And you further in your review learned that Dr. Murray stated that Michael Jackson was resistant to this change. Did you see that?
I'm not necessarily sure if I recall that terminology of resistance to the weaning of propofol.
Well, you recall the Michael Jackson telling Dr. Murray that's the only thing that works for him?
I recall Dr. Murray stating that is what Mr. Jackson was asking for. But as physicians, we are not just there to enable and provide patients with what they ask us for, but to do what's right.
I didn't really ask you about that. I request that last remark be stricken, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained by the defense. Everything after the word but, including the word but in the last answer, is stricken. The first part of the answer remains. Ms. McNeil, can you read back the first part of the answer before the but? How about the question and the answer?
Question. Well, don't you recall that Michael Jackson telling Dr. Murray that's the only thing that works for him? Answer. I recall Dr. Murray stating that is what Mr. Jackson was asking for.
That's the answer, ladies and gentlemen. Everything after that is stricken. Mr. Flanagan.
Doctor, have you, in your practice, ever experienced a patient who was resistant to your recommendations regarding treatment?
Yes.
And what do you do in that type of case?
Well, depends on if it's within the realm of my practice. If I feel like a patient has a problem that is outside of the realm of my practice, i.e. it requires more a multidisciplinary approach, meaning other specialties involved or other specialists outside of my field, I make sure I refer the patient. I think one of the first rules is to realize your limitations. And very often when I have patients like that where they may be difficult and there may be some underlying issues, whether it's underlying psychiatric, psychological, or other medical issues that are outside of my realm, I refer them to those specialists that can help them as well.
Now, if you have a patient that is somewhat resistant to your recommendations in your field of expertise, what do you do in that case?
I need you to rephrase that because resistance can be if they are just not receptive to the recommendations that I have, or it could be that they're asking for something. So those are two different things. Could you clarify that?
What if they're just resistant to your recommendations? They don't want to do what you think they should do.
Well, patients have a right. Autonomy is very clear. Patients have a right to refuse therapy. As long as they make an informed decision, they have a right to refuse therapy. As much as that therapy I may feel would be in their best interest, they have a right to refuse therapy.
Now, and if they do refuse therapy, what do you do?
First off, I always want to make sure that they are of sound mind and judgment, because that is, especially in the inpatient realm, when their patients have a multitude of problems, you always want to make sure that they are of sound judgment, so they are competent to make that decision. And if that is the case, I really allow autonomy. If patients are aware of the risks, the benefits, and in this case, if they're refusing therapy, what could happen to them if they refuse therapy, that is patient autonomy.
Well, in this case, in your review of the records and review of Dr. Murray's statement of his discussions with Michael Jackson, have you made a determination as to whether or not Michael Jackson was of sound judgment?
Based on the records, I'm not able to make that determination.
In the event that the patient is totally resistant to what you want to do and wants to do it a certain way because he's had success in the past doing it a different way, and it was against your approval, what would you do with that patient?
Hypothetical.
Overruled. You may answer.
If I feel that that therapy is wrong, I refuse. I refuse that care.
Okay. And if the patient was rather insistent, would you continue to refuse?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Again,
would you tell the patient to get another doctor?
I would try to inquire about the reasons why they're refusing. It's very important to try to understand, not just say, well, you know, you're totally making the wrong decision, but really try to get to the root of the problem and say, well, why is it? Why do you have these false misconceptions about this treatment? Do you understand what the risks are? Do you understand what you're doing to yourself? So the first thing I would do is try to get an understanding as opposed to say, hey, just go to another doctor. I think that's another responsibility of a physician. And certainly by doing that, I can kind of delve deeper and see if that patient perhaps may need another specialist, may need somebody to deal with an element of care that I don't have expertise in dealing with.
Do you know whether or not Dr. Murray had these types of conversations with Mr. Jackson?
Nothing in the records that I've reviewed indicate that.
Okay, and what you've reviewed for the pertinent time is just a statement with the police?
In terms of
Dr. Murray?
Mary's testimony, yes.
Yes, and in the statements to the police, he did describe conversations similar to what you've just outlined, didn't he?
Page reference.
I don't know to what that refers. It seems to me it's vague. Do you understand it?
No.
Sustain.
He did give you a description of, in the statement, he did give a description of conversations that he had on the night of June 25th with Mr. Jackson and arguing over whether or not he was going to be given propofol, didn't he?
Objection. We have a page reference?
I'll sustain the objection. Do you have page line?
No, I don't. I've just,
You may answer it if you're able.
No. I'm not. I don't know.
okay.